Hello and welcome to the OTB channel. One of the things that I'm often asked to look at is really lightweight distros that you can either install to hard drive or just use on a USB key and use as a live system. So I thought today, well, let's do that. I'm going to look at Bodhi Linux, a really lightweight distro that is installable if that's what you like, but it comes with all the bling and, to my mind, looks like a modern desktop as well, not like something out of the 90s. See you after the intro. Okay, welcome back. I always forget to say this, but as the little thing's coming up, please subscribe and like if you enjoy the videos. Right, Bodhi Linux. I've seen this reviewed a few times, this distro, over the last few years. And what always struck me was that it looks like it has a really pretty desktop. And in the world of incredibly lightweight distros, that's not always the case. They've tended to look a little bit basic, to me anyway, a bit Windows 95-ish. And I've always thought Bodhi looked quite modern. It uses the Enlightenment desktop manager, which I've tried off and on over the years, but I'll admit the last time I used it was probably about 10 years ago. And it felt a little bit unstable at that point. But obviously the years have passed, and I'll be interested to see what it's like now. So the whole idea of Enlightenment was it was a window manager that could give you all the bling and the effects without being heavy on your hardware. And so it makes sense for something like Bodhi to actually include it. You can, of course, install it on USB and just use it as a live system, but you have the option to install it onto disk as well. Now, I've done this, and I've just had a play with it, and I'll tell you now as a spoiler, I've come away feeling quite impressed that it's a really usable desktop. I probably wouldn't use it for my main system simply because I don't need a lightweight system. But if I was a real Enlightenment fan, even if I had modern hardware, I might consider it still. It's based on Ubuntu 18.04. I'm just looking through here when this was released, and the latest edition is 5.1, and it was released in March 2020, and it's still using Ubuntu 18.04, so I'm not quite sure why it hasn't been upgraded. But I'm assuming anyway that as it's an Ubuntu system, you could do an upgrade on it anyway through the command line or with the updater. So the whole of the Ubuntu software repos are available, but as default, it comes with a really, really small selection of apps. And most of these are lightweight and you can build up on it. Now, the desktop itself, that's kind of it's Enlightenment that's been customized, and I keep calling it, you'll notice throughout the video, so before anybody picks up on it, the Moshka desktop, but it's actually pronounced Moksha, not Moshka. Just trying to get my tongue around it. So it's sort of their own version of Enlightenment DR17, and it looks really smart, I have to say. So let's go and have a look at the website. I'll show you what I've installed and what I've had a play with, and then I'll take you through what I think of the desktop and my discovery. And what you're seeing on video really is my discovery. I've never used this before. I fired it up, I turned on the camera, and I'm playing with it and discovering features as we go, because I think it's really important that if a desktop is going to be usable, it has to be intuitive enough that you can get to grips with the basics right from the word go. So let's go to the split screen and let's look at their website. So here we are at the split screen, and you should be able to see the Bodhi Linux web page in front of you. So 5.1, the latest release, has not actually been out that long. And so I do find it a bit surprising that it's still based on 1804, but hey, you know, it is what it is. And the website's quite extensive, a blog, a link to download. We have the wiki, an app center. Now, they recommend some apps and you can install them apparently from a web browser, but you have of course got all of the Ubuntu apps that you can install in the traditional way through Synaptic or just through the command line. You've got links to a forum, live chat, and a merch store and the opportunity to donate, and something about the Moksha desktop. I'll get that wrong throughout the video. I know that already because I've recorded that bit already. I'm just moving down here, and it seems that they've got a new developer, Robert Wiley. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Who apparently has recently joined the Bodhi community in that position, and this is his first release. So, hey, he says it's a little bit later than what he had hoped, but it's been hopefully worth the wait. So you then have a wiki there, and the wiki gives you some basic instructions. What are the system requirements? Well, let's have a quick look at that. Right, so minimal, a 500 meg processor, which I think just about anything these days is going to do that. 256 meg of RAM and 5 gig of disk space. But to be comfortable, a 1 gig processor, 512 meg of RAM and 10 gig of disk space. Okay, so its requirements are pretty low. And there's a range of tutorials available on the wiki. If I tick on the table of contents, you can see that you've got something to read through and play with. I do like that. Whether the manual's online or whether it's included with the distro, as long as there's something people can actually refer to, I think that's a great thing. If you go to the downloads page, you have 4 different releases. And I looked at this for a while and I wasn't sure which. The standard release, the HWE release, the app pack release, or the legacy release. And I thought, what on earth are those? So I clicked on this page. And apparently the standard release is the 64-bit operating system, which is really lightweight in terms of not having that much installed. It's a base for you to build on. The standard release, though, does not push kernel updates on the user, so it's only going to be app updates. You then have the HWE release, and I'm looking at that, and it seems to be for more modern hardware. And one of the things it seems to do here is it will update your kernel if that's what you want. And so you can get newer hardware support if you've got a particularly new machine. You then have the legacy release, which is 32-bit. And it's always great to have that option. I'm not quite sure how many people are still running 32-bit machines. But if you have an old machine sat in the corner that you've not used for years and years, this might well bring it back to life. You've then got the app pack release, which kind of builds on the standard release by including a load of additional software here. So, including printer support, I see, which might be actually quite useful. I've just gone for the standard release, the minimal release, so that I can have a play with it. I wasn't sure when I was playing with it initially what version or what type of web browser it was using. I thought it might be Midori initially, But I had a look at the release notes here, and apparently it's not. They've actually replaced Midori with Epiphany. When you open up the About page, it just says Web. They call it Web, so it's not clear what it is. And you'll see, as you're watching the video, that I'm wondering what it is. And, yeah. Okay, look. So this is Bodhi Linux. It's a lightweight distro. It's based on Enlightenment, using the Moksha version, or fork of Enlightenment, I suppose you'd call it. Let's see what it has to offer. Okay, so you can see the latest version of Bodhi booting on my copy of VirtualBox here. I've already installed it to the disk. It's the standard Ubiquity installer that you've all seen many times on Ubuntu-based distros, and there's nothing different here. The ISO gives you the option to run a live session, and you can install it from there. You'll need to find the installer in the menu. It's not on the desktop. Or you can just install directly from the ISO. So I originally ran this live, and then I installed it to disk, and what you see now is the default. And I have to say, it's quite an unusual, I mean, it's big on green here, obviously, but it's quite an unusual but nice looking desktop. One of the things that I have installed, if I can just find where it's put it, is HTOP. Let's just start off by having a look at HTOP. And 199 megs. Wow. Okay, so that certainly qualifies Bodhi for being lightweight. So let me just come out of that, and it certainly feels very snappy. We have a panel down here at the bottom, and if I launch the menu, the default applications that are on here are what came with the standard ISO, with the exception of HTOP, which I've installed, and it's LeafPad and Vim. AR&R, which is actually quite useful for setting your display resolution. Although I have to say, this booted immediately into full HD 1080. Wasn't an issue at all. I've not had to mess with the settings at all. In terms of graphics, you have a photo application, ePhoto. For internet, well, you have a browser called Web. And I'm not entirely sure what this is, whether or not it's Midori or something separate. You can see I've got a few tabs here. I've been clicking through the system to see how it works. But yeah, let's have a look and see what it says. There isn't an option there that tells us about. What about over here? Okay, about. Right, it's just called Web. A simple, clean, beautiful view of the web powered by WebKit GTK. Okay, so that's your default web browser. We'll come back to that in a second. What else have we got? Well, that's pretty much it as far as web is concerned. You've got Pulse Audio volume control, and in the System Tools menu, you've got the Bodhi App Center, which just launches a web browser, and I'll show you that in a second. It uses PCman FM as the file manager. The Synaptic Package Manager is installed by default. Terminology is the terminal client, and you've got a link to network connections, and to me that looks pretty much just like Network Manager. What about if we have a look at system settings? Right. Right, I forgot to let you know that I did install this earlier on because it was recommended on the wiki for Bodhi Linux. And it seems to be a basic settings application where you can configure light DM, the background, etc. Or you can set up your keyboard layout. I have to say it's set mine as UK English, and that seems to have persisted across the installation. And you can set up your time and date. Well, that's colourful, I'll give it that. And here you can set your startup applications. So, all good. What else have we got? That's pretty much it as far as the applications part of the menu are concerned. You've then got a places menu, a quick launcher. Okay. Right, that's quite nice. So you choose what you want to open. Now, the thing is, how do I actually close this? I suppose I go back. That's interesting. I'm not exactly sure how, now that I've done this, how to close this off. It seems to be a widget. But okay, we'll leave that there for the time being and come back and have a look at it. Oh, there we are. I just have to click and it comes out. There's a screenshot tool there, and then a little bit about the operating system itself. So about Bodhi Linux. I presume this is going to be... Oh, right. This is more or less credits by the look of it. Right. Well, let's just come out of that. About Moshka. You can probably see at the bottom here that it's just scrolling up all the details about the team that produced the Moshka desktop. About the theme. It's using Arc Green by default. And that's pretty much there. Restart Moshka. If I click on Restart Moshka, oh, I see. It doesn't restart the operating system itself. It just restarts the desktop or window manager, if you like. If we move down to settings, we can then go to a settings panel. And I'll just make this a little bit bigger. And you can see here that we've got lots of icons on the top about what we want to configure, and then various items here. So if we want to set our wallpaper, there only seems to be the single picture at the moment, but you can clearly add any custom wallpaper that you want. What application theme is set? Well, at the moment it's Moshka Arc Green. What theme? I actually installed Arc Dark. I haven't tried it yet, but we'll play with that in a second. And colours, fonts, borders, transitions, scaling, startup. Oh, that's your startup screen by the look of it, the splash screen. You can then go on to apps. And actually, this is quite a detailed settings menu because each of these top icons breaks down into a whole range of other settings that you might want to look at. Virtual desktop, screen locking, blanking, the backlight, edge bindings, the mouse, window process management. Wow, there's lots here. I think it'd actually take quite a lot to do. The configuration panel, show configurations in menu. Okay. I've not used this before, so I'm pretty much exploring as we go. A section for environment variables, a search engine by the look of it, performance. Okay, so we can set frame rate and application priorities, files, a launcher, dialog boxes. We can install extensions. There's a few installed here, as you can see. And a preferences section for AR&R. Okay, so it's just a launcher really for AR&R. Elementary configuration. So that includes, oh, right, we've got a whole range more menus here. So for scaling, the themes that we want to use, the icons that we want to use. the fonts, audio, profiles, scrolling, rendering. Guys, I'm quite impressed at the level of settings that you have on such what appears initially to be a very, very simple desktop. So, yeah, let's go back to settings. So we then have modes. I'm not sure what presentation mode is, but let's click on it. Mosca is in presentation mode. Okay. I can't actually see what difference that's making, but let's untick it and go back. Presentation mode is over. Okay. We've got a number of gadgets that we can use. Desktop gadgets. Okay, so the background and how they actually work. Shelves. Now, the shelves is quite interesting. So at the moment, I think there's one shelf and it's basically the system tray. So for instance, if I click on the shelf that's there, the default shelf, and have a look at the contents, what seems to be there is the clipboard, the clock, the iBar, the pager, which is the workspace pager, the mixer. I can't actually see that here, but it could be that. And the start button. Right, so let's add something to that. Let's add, let's see what we've got. Something newer. Let's add a places menu. If I click on that, and there you go. In the bottom right-hand corner, you can see a little places menu has been added. And that just tells us a bit about the file system and how much space we're using. And if I click on that, it opens up your file manager. Okay, well, that's quite nice. I can also add another shelf. So let's just go with the default name. Right. If I click on advanced, that doesn't really tell me anything. But if I click on that shelf I've just created here and click on contents, what do we want to put on it? Let's just do the log out button. And you can see there, I've now got a log out button. How do I actually change where that is? Well, if I go into advanced, you can see it's on the left in the middle of the screen, but I could put it right at the top of the screen. And you can create as many of these shelves and fill them with gadgets as you want. So that's all good. I quite like this, to be honest. I think I could quite get to enjoy it. Let's have a look at the themes. So at the moment, it's using this Mosca Arc Green. Let's go for the Arc Dark and apply it. And it looked to me like it restarted. Okay, so far so good. Right, and you've got various theme categories that you can change there. So let me just shut that. I think there's something else I have to do as well. It hasn't changed, as far as I'm aware, the GTK theme. So if I go to, where would I go? System settings? No, it's not that one. There's a more extensive settings app that we've already seen. The settings panel. And if we go to application theme and we change the GTK theme to Arc Dark and apply it, not a huge noticeable difference at the moment. What about changing the icons? Let's change them to blue. Right, that's worked. So we now have blue icons and the Arc Dark theme. And I quite like that, although it's taken away the little Mosca menu I see. So, right, so it has changed everything to blue. But do you know what? I think, looking at this, I'm going to set everything back to this arc green, which seems to, I don't know, just somehow fit. And I've got my little menu icon here now. And if I shut that down and go back into the settings panel and go to the application theme, I'm going to turn that back to Moshka Arc Green. There we go. So hopefully we're back at where we should be. And I've just realized that no, we're not, because we still have the icons that I used last time. So let me go to the application theme again, use the icons and choose the arc green icons. There we go. Okay, so we're looking at how it was via default. So quite nice, quite like this. It's an Ubuntu-based system, so you can use apt update, apt install. I haven't actually found a software updater in the system, but what you do have is, if I go up to the applications menu, you have the Bodhi App Center. Now, the Bodhi App Center just gives you lists of various apps that you can install without having to go to the terminal. So just as a for instance, if I went to, let me have a look here, web browsers, and I decided I wanted to install Chromium or Firefox, let's go for Firefox. I simply click on that, click the install button, enter my password. Incorrect password. Oh dear, that's not good. Let me try again. Right, here we go. Something's happening now. So for people who don't actually like using the command line, I suppose this gives you a small selection of apps, and not just lightweight apps. I mean, Firefox and Chromium, you wouldn't necessarily call them lightweight, but it's a nice way of having this. I don't know whether this page only works with the default web browser or whether it would work with the likes of Firefox or Chromium as well. But hey-ho, you know, we'll see. Right. Package Firefox has been successfully installed. Let's just have a quick look at that. Presumably under Internet. And yes, we should be able to launch it now. And there we go. Firefox has been installed. Don't forget, though, that you have the full range of Ubuntu packages that you can install anyway. Let's just have a look at what they've got in here. You've got burning software, Brasero or XFburn, chat clients, HexChat or Pigeon, email clients, so Thunderbird or Claws Mail. They're always going to go for the lighter options where they can. File managers. Well, we've already got PCman FM installed, but you can install Nautilus. Not exactly what I'd call lightweight, or Double Commander. I've not actually heard of that. Various icon sets. I'm not going to click through all of this. And there's also Moshka modules. So if you want to add in extra modules, CPU usage, desktop rain, a launcher dock, penguins. Okay, let's have a look at penguins. What does that do? Adds penguins running around your desktop. Right, we've got to give that an install just to see what happens. And we'll let it do its thing now. Right, so let's install it. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. Okay, so that's been installed. Now, as this is a module, let me just close this web browser. I'm wondering if this is actually going to turn up in my modules. So let me have a look. Doesn't seem to be there. Right, okay. No module selected. So if I load that, we have little penguins raining down on our desktop. Oh, I love that. I know it's completely useless and it's only likely to destroy your productivity, but what a great little thing. Okay, so it really is a very, very much a quick look. So you have modules, you can attach some of them to shelves, or you can just load others on their own. You've got themes. You can install lots of themes. Okay, so this is a quick look at Bodhi Linux. Right, let's go and have a chat. Right, so that was Bodhi Linux. Overall, I have to say I'm quite impressed. For something that's so lightweight and snappy, it has quite a lot of functionality. I'm not used to Enlightenment at all, so we've had a bit of a meander around the desktop to see what I pick up automatically. And the settings are quite extensive from what I can see, and you're obviously going to have to look at all of them in detail if you install it yourself. But just to get it up and running, without having to go into great detail by looking at the wiki, it pretty much works, and it feels snappy, and it certainly looks very nice, and I think I would recommend it. I have a few qualms. I don't know why they're still using the old 18.4 Ubuntu distribution. It would be better if it was updated to the latest long-term support release. I believe it kind of tracks the long-term support releases, so it doesn't do the interim updates, which isn't a problem, really. My other qualm was that it doesn't seem to have any sort of updater. And I went on the wiki, and there are instructions there for using something called EED or EEP data. I couldn't find it installed by default, so I installed it out of the repos, just apt install EEP data, and it worked fine. It should really be installed by default. I'm not quite sure why it isn't. Unless I just missed it, but no, I couldn't have done because it did actually do an install. So Bodhi Linux, give it a try. It's certainly worth looking at. And the Enlightenment desktop has come on leaps and bounds since I've last looked at it. So a decent distro. Right, guys, well, as you all know, I've recently set up a Patreon account. As much as anything else, to try and get some more hardware together. And I'm going to put a thing down here, a little pop-up that just shows you patreon.com OldTechBloke. And I'd like to say a very special thank you to 10 special people who are my current patrons. So starting with Cabinian, we then have Aristotelis, Stormpix, Stephen Cross, Mike Long, David, Entropy UK, Richard, Ty, and the newest member, who is Philip Espy. Thank you, guys. You are going to make this channel all it can be over the next year. Right, everyone. Have a great day, and I'll see you at the weekend.